After that first meeting you've described, in which you were informed that priests were placed on monitoring and no memo was made of that or notes taken by you and or recording made of that meeting, why not? Why not? Why not record that? Why not put it in a memo? Why not get that list at that time?
Objection. Can you break it down and ask a question instead of 6?
Why not make a recording of the whole thing? Didn't it seem important enough to get down, to get recorded, to get done?
It was important to me. I asked for the meeting with Father McDonough so that I could have an idea of where we were in terms of our safe environments.
Were you concerned, Archbishop, that we shouldn't make some recording of this meeting about these decisions to keep this secret or not? Because if you did, it might be subject to some discovery by us or others who were in litigation with you in the Archdiocese?
Well, that didn't occur to me at the time.
Did it ever occur to you at any time, or were you told that some of these things, conversations, shouldn't be put in writing because they could be discovered by us in litigation and known to the public?
I believe that Father McDonough once said that to me,
When?
but it was outside of that context. I can't recall exactly the date.
How long ago?
I don't have any recollection of that.
What were you discussing?
I don't recall.
Who were you discussing?
That I don't recall either.
Anybody else give you that guidance?
No, sir.
Anybody else present at the McDonough meeting when he said that to you?
It wasn't at that meeting. I didn't want to imply that. I don't recall the circumstances in which he had said that.
Yeah, I'm just talking about when McDonough told you that. Was anybody else present?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. You must have been discussing something very sensitive at that time, but you just don't recall today what it was and whom it involved?
I don't, sir. I'm sorry.
You followed his advice, didn't you?
In terms of?
Not putting certain things into writing.
Yes.
How many different times do you think you chose not to put certain things into writing concerning scandalous material such as sexual abuse by minors?
It wouldn't have been very many.
Well, very many. Does that mean more than a dozen or less?
My understanding today is that would have been less.
Okay. Tell me the times that you remember having conversations where you made the conscious choice not to put it into writing because you were concerned, as McDonough had advised you, that it may be subject to discovery and litigation, and you didn't want it to be recorded.
I can't recall the number of times. I'm sorry.
Tell me the contents of any of those conversations and with whom they were had.
Again, I would just be guessing. I would be speculating.
And because it was not recorded on any journal, any diary, or the contents of any of those discussions, there would be no way to test or determine today how many times you actually did have such a conversation, correct?
That is correct.
Do you keep a journal?
I do not.
Do you have any memory today of having any of those meetings or the contents of any of those meetings where you made the conscious choice not to record it because it could be discovered or discoverable in litigation, and it pertained to sexual abuse of minors by priests?
I do not.
Do you have the names of any of the priests in mind that you're thinking today? I do remember discussing ex-priests and making the conscious decision that we can't put that in writing because if we do, Anderson and his team will discover it. It could be public.
First, that assumes facts, not in evidence. I don't think he's ever testified to that. Archbishop, if don't guess or don't just assume that that's what happened just because the question's asked that way.
I would be guessing.
Okay. So my question to you is, do you have any memory of the contents of any conversation concerning any offender today that falls into that category of no notes or records made?
I do not know.
Okay. Did you instruct anyone else to not document conversations such as that
I don't
for
know.
the same reasons at any time?
I don't believe I did, no.
Okay. So that would be just you and McDonough that particular practice would apply to, correct?
Objection. That's not what he stated, that it was a practice, as you've implied, counsel. Don't misstate the record.
Give me a legal objection.
The
Not a
objection
speaking.
is don't put facts into the record that are not accurate. You are doing that.
Take it off the time. Give me a legal objection. What's the legal objection?
You're misstating facts and absolutely trying to change and taint your record for your media, and that's not what is appropriate, counsel, and you know it.
That is not a legal objection. Archbishop, the question is, anybody else besides yourself and Father McDonough made a party to such a practice of not recording sensitive meetings such as that?
Not to my knowledge.
Same objections.
Archbishop, did you review any materials in preparation for your deposition today?
I did.
What?
I reviewed the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People. I reviewed a summary of the Adamson case, and I reviewed the case of Father Montero.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. When you say you reviewed a summary of the Adamson case, what was that you looked at?
It was a summary of his particular file that we had.
Prepared by whom?
By Mr. Kippers.
And when was it prepared? Was it for your review and this deposition?
I beg your pardon?
When was it prepared?
I believe it was in the last 2 to 3 weeks.
And for this deposition to help you?
Yes.
And was the same kind of thing prepared for Montero that you reviewed?
No, it wasn't as extensive.
But was that also prepared by Mr. Kippers for you in preparation for this deposition?
Correct.
Anything else that you reviewed?
No, sir. I did review the names of the 43 priests that are on our website.
That's it? In terms of review?
Correct.
Did you learn anything in your review of the Montero summary prepared for you in this deposition, in preparation for this deposition, that you had not known before about Montero and his history?
I did. I learned that the charges against him had been dropped before he left the country.
Did you not know that until you reviewed the summary?
That happened before I became Archbishop.
Had Montero ever been on your radar as a priest who had been accused of offending and had left the country in the Archdiocese.
Yes, I was aware of that.
How did you become aware of that?
I believe at the time that he had left, and a letter was sent from Bishop Pates to the bishop in Mexico, explaining to him the situation that we had experienced here.
Did you yourself ever request or demand that any of your subordinates and those in the inner circle, the chancellors or the vicar generals or auxiliary bishops, ever retrieve any files of those who had been accused so that you could make an independent decision to review those files yourself?
Could you repeat the question?
Have you ever reviewed any of the files except for what you just described involving Adamson and Montero prepared for you? Have you yourself ever reviewed any of the priest files personally so that you can be satisfied that you are making the right decisions concerning that priest?
Well,
I object to the form. It's compounded.
We've had, since December, a complete review of the files by an outside company called Kinsale.
Okay.
And
but that's something you've delegated, though, isn't it, to somebody else?
Something that we hired a group,
Okay,
outside company for, yes.
Now I'm asking you personally, have you ever said, I want to review the file of Father X and have that file produced to you in its entirety so you could make a fully informed decision about what to do or not to do? Have you personally ever done that?
I don't recall that I have.
And until recently, you had delegated that responsibility then to whom?
To the delegate for safe environments.
And that would have been McDonough.
It was Father McDonough until about a year ago when Father Dan Griffith, another priest of the Archdiocese, took that position over.
And did you make the decision to remove McDonough because of disclosures about how he had handled this publicly, and there was both criticism and scrutiny of that?
No, I realized that he had multiple responsibilities. He'd been in the job for 17 years, and I felt it was time that we needed a change.
Have you at any time warned, penalized, or reprimanded McDonough for the way he handled his job as the delegate for safe environment under your charge?
I don't believe so.
Do you fault him for any of the decisions he made or recommendations to you now?
I've always believed that Father McDonough had the best intentions. He certainly shared with me the priority we had of maintaining safe environments in our parishes, our schools, and our other programs.
My question goes to actions, not intentions. Have you ever reprimanded or criticized or faulted him for any of his actions taken concerning any of these priests who have offended and have been accused of offending?
I don't recall having done so.
As you reflect today and look back at the history now before you, do you fault him for any of the decisions that he made as your delegate and or as Vicar General in this Archdiocese concerning the safety of children?
The only thing that comes to my mind is the fact that I learned subsequent to the fact that when Father Waymeyer was arrested for drunk driving, that was not shared with the trustees, and there was some reason that he had for not doing that. I disagreed with him in that decision. That's the only one I can think of.
Any other decisions concerning sexual abuse of minors and Father McDonough's actions pertaining to that you either fault or now look back upon as deficient in the protection of children?
Object to the form.
Could you rephrase that question, please?
Any other actions taken by Kevin McDonough as your delegate for safe environment or as Vicar General that you look back on now and say, he blew it when it comes to protection of the children and the recommendation he made to me?
Object to the form. It's argumentative. Go ahead.
I don't believe so, no.
So you think he did a good job about that, huh?
I believe he did.
You think you're doing a good job?
I believe I am, yes.
Have you yourself, when you reflect on what has happened to date and all that has been revealed to you to this date and time, have you yourself made any mistakes in failing to protect children and provide the safe environment to this community that you promised when you took the job?
The only mistake that I know for sure I made was not removing the faculties from Father Levan, but I didn't know that was happening at the time. Once I learned it, I acted.
Any others? Is that it?
That's it.
Let's talk about Father Levan then for a moment. You continue to maintain publicly and as a part of the Charter for the Protection of Children, adopted in 2002, to believe that this Archdiocese has a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to sexual abuse. Is that correct?
We have tried to maintain that as our standard, yes.
And you say you have tried to maintain that as your standard. Have you maintained that as your standard?
I believe we have. I think the record shows that in the last 20 years we have had 2 incidents. Now those are too many, but 2 incidents in which child had been abused by priests who were in ministry at the time.
And what two priests are you referring to, Archbishop?
Father Francis Montero and Father Weimar.
And how was then the zero tolerance policy as represented to the people violated as it pertains to Father Freddie Montero?
Objection. That misstates facts. He didn't say that it was.
Didn't you say that it was?
Did I say what?
Didn't you say that the zero tolerance policy was not adhered to when it came to Montero?
No, I didn't say that. We immediately removed him from ministry and turned the case over to the police. So I believe that we maintained the zero policy that we had.
Did you ever review the Montero file itself?
No.
Were you aware that Montero was living with Father Kevin McDonough?
I believe I did know that.
Were you aware that Father McDonough had some responsibilities for supervision over him because Montero was an extern priest from Ecuador?
Well, my understanding was that he lived in the rectory at St. Peter Claver.
And that's where Father McDonough was assigned as pastor.
Correct.
And he was assigned there so McDonough could keep an eye on him. Were you aware of that?
I was not aware of that.
Were you aware that Montero...
That was before my time.
Were you aware that Montero was allowed to leave this archdiocese and return to Ecuador before the police could complete an adequate investigation?
Objection. It misstates the facts and the evidence.
My understanding of the facts is that the charges against him were dropped before he left the country.
Do you have any information that the police investigation had not been completed?
No, I don't.
Okay. Are you aware that as soon as Montero was allowed to leave the archdiocese and return to his home diocese in Ecuador, he was placed in active ministry?
We removed his faculties when the accusation arose. We never gave him back faculties, and he returned home to his own home diocese.
And did you tell the bishop of his home diocese that his faculties had been removed because an accusation of childless sexual abuse had been made against him?
Yes, I believe Bishop Pates was the one that wrote to the bishop about that.
And what bishop did Bishop Pates write to?
To the bishop of the diocese. I can't recall the exact diocese in Ecuador.
And was that were you aware that Father Montero was immediately returned to active ministry in Ecuador?
I would only be speculating to say that I did. I don't know for sure.
I called Father Montero shortly after we learned and brought suit concerning that case, that he was in Ecuador, and talked with him. And he was then in active ministry. And did you know that we had a conversation with him?
I did not.
Did you see anything in the Montero file that you reviewed that we had such a conversation?
I did not specifically review the Montero file. I had a summary from my civil chancellor.
Father Montero did not indicate that any restrictions on his faculties had been placed and he was in active ministry. Does that concern you, that he's now in Ecuador in active ministry?
Well, I believe that's why Bishop Pates wrote the letter to the bishop. We were concerned about that.
But I'm talking about today. about the kids in Ecuador, having reviewed what Mr. Keppers gave you in preparation for this deposition, and having reviewed that, are you now concerned that maybe something more should be done about Montero being in Ecuador, given the benefit of what you now know that you didn't before?
Objection. It's argumentative. Go ahead.
I would agree to that, yes.
Maybe we should do something about that. I was able to call him and talk to him. Maybe this would be a great opportunity for you to directly contact the bishop in Ecuador and say, Bishop, we do have concerns based on what Mr. Kepper has told me and the information we have about the safety of the children in Ecuador, about Freddie Montero. Maybe you should give him a full disclosure of what you know here and about what happened. Do you think that's a good idea?
Objection. That has nothing to do with this case, counsel. It's argumentative. It's a speech. It's compound. Asks dozens of questions within it. It assumes facts, not in evidence. It's your facts. Ask a question, and he can answer.
Speaking of objection,
Ask a good question. That's one question.
Are you willing to do that, Archbishop?
Willing to do what?
Contact the bishop in Ecuador
Well, as I
about Freddie
indicated,
Montero.
as I indicated before, he's already been contacted. That happened before I became Archbishop. I would be willing to contact him again and to share my concerns with him, yes.
I would appreciate that. I think it's very important that you do that. Thank you.
You're welcome.